Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Scoreboard. I think if I had asked every single person to tell me, to pay me 10 cents for every time they thought that this was a crucial session and the game was going to be 100% swinging on this for this series, and that, or that India were already out of the series, or that now that India definitely couldn't win it, I would already be so rich that I could retire 3 or 4 times over. And again, this game and this series has swung. It was a remarkable partnership. And Nitish Reddy is going to get so much of the respect and adulation for it. But it really was a partnership by 2 younger players, both of which, you know, there's been a lot of flack for Rohit Sharma and Gautam Gambhir of recent times. They backed 2 younger players kind of on the fringes and outside the team, brought them in, and they completely stood up. A lot of people weren't very happy with the 6-bowler, 8-batter lineup. Not sure why, because that's kind of the dream. But it didn't particularly work with the ball, and somehow it has managed to save them with the bat. This after Rishabh Pant has upset Sunil Gavaskar so much that I don't know if they'll ever go skipping together again. So what a remarkable turnaround this game has had again. Australia are still the most likely team to win, but you look at the opportunities now. Australia might go. Let's say Australia roll India quite quickly tomorrow, and then they make 300 in 2.5 sessions. India still are then chasing just over 400 in 4 sessions. That's a very winnable position for India, and certainly a very drawable position, although teams don't draw anymore, so you would assume winning is probably easier than drawing in modern cricket. India could make another 50 or 60 runs. Australia could get rolled for 250, trying to put on a total too quickly, or the third innings pickle, if you will. And then we could have a situation where India has a chance of winning as well. There's also the Jasprit Bumrah part of all this, of if anyone's going to make a terrible pitch look better than it actually is, that could play a part. The wicket could fall apart. Like, it's more likely that Australia win this game, or it's a draw, than India win. But there's actually all 3 results are still available to us. And that is not exactly how we felt coming into today. So huge swing, miraculous day of Test cricket. Isn't it wonderful? If you've got a question, Super Chat's obviously always the best way to go. But let's get stuck into the scorecard to begin. All right. This is Nitish Reddy scoring sectors this series. I could have started with many different graphics. What I like about this is that he does legitimately score everywhere. When I'm looking at a batting prospect, it's not that that's the most important thing. USvIND Khawaja does not score in all different parts of the ground. There are plenty of players. Safras does not score in all parts of the ground. But when you're looking at someone who is probably going to bat at 6, 7, and 8, you're trying to work out if they are a handy bat or a legitimate bat. And we've certainly seen signs that he is better than just a handy bat. But one of the things that you look for is something as simple as this, as he scores absolutely everywhere around the ground. And it's a good mixture. You know, I would say cover is probably his strongest scoring place. And I'm not surprised that he's got a few more runs there. But it's only 63. And if you take away fine leg, because fine leg's not all that important, the next lowest one is backward point, which is 21, right? And they happen to be right next to each other. So I think that this is a very, very good sign. And if we look at the innings today, we could see here that, you know, just how many boundaries come through. I really like the way he worked Australia when they had Nathan Lyon have the long on back. He got lots of runs through there as well. Obviously brought up his 100 with the hit down the ground. Just very good balance all the way through. And again, when you're looking at balance and control and all these sorts of things, defended 30%, attacked 28%, rotated 22%, and didn't play a shot to 19%. Right? There's no outliers there. There's nothing bizarre about it. It's just good, normal, quality test batting. This is his first class scores so far. So we know that this, in terms of his overall runs in his career, this is a bit of an outlier score. But if you have a look here, obviously he was probably picked slightly before he was ready at times and took a while to develop. It's starting to become much different. And of course, we then had this incredible runs of 40s. I don't think this innings today suddenly means that he can bat at number 6 consistently and be a success from tomorrow in Test cricket. But I do think watching this innings, it would be hard to think that he is not a genuine chance of doing those things, right? I've been thinking of all the different all-rounders you can sort of compare him to. You know, because he's not Sam Curran, right? His bowling isn't as strong as Sam Curran's. But if you compare them purely on batting, I don't think there's ever been a stage when we've seen Sam Curran when we've thought, well, he can be a genuine number 6 for England consistently in Test cricket. Whereas even with this slim first-class record of Nitish Reddy, there is something to be said for the fact that the way he plays, the way he picks up the ball, his composure, his control, all these different things do suggest that there is a potential number 6 there. And we'll get onto it later, but he might have to be a number 6. His strike rates versus different bowlers today obviously went after the 2 part-timers a little bit. Scored quite well off Nathan Lyon. Loves scoring off Scotty Boland more than anyone else. Pat Cummins is probably the bowler who gets in the most issue, especially with that short ball, and he doesn't like it when Stark comes around the wicket. So you could see the pattern here of, most players are probably going to struggle to score off Scott Boland, and his is a little bit different. And I really like the way he played Lyon. This is 200 runs by an Indian batter in a series in Australia, aged 25 or less. It's a hell of a title, that. But, you've got Virender Sehwag over here, Tendulkar, Rishabh Pant, I think, is on here twice. There's Rishabh Pant a couple of times. Kohli is on this. Jaiswal is now there. Shubman Gill, Vivius Laxman. Some very good players on this, right? And Nitish Kumar has managed to do that with the highest average so far. That might likely come down, but the highest average so far. And he is doing it for number 7 and number 8, right? It's remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. And on top of that, he has the second most runs in this series at the moment, the most for India. And again, he's doing it for number 7 or number 8. Now, there's also an element of it's easier to make those runs from number 7 and number 8. And he's got the best false shot percentage in this series of anyone with 150 runs, right? So you can see up here, Jaiswal's at 21%, Travis Head's at 17.5%. So, that those are number 1 and number 3 on the list. He's at 16%. Travis Head has batted a little bit further down the order. Jaiswal has opened. So it's not exactly apples with apples all the way through here. But even though he's come in later and everything else, he's still come in some tricky situations in Adelaide and in Perth in the first innings. He was in a tricky situation today, even if the pitch wasn't tricky. He just doesn't make a lot of errors as a batter. It's really interesting going through the way he bats and watching it. And even when he's been attacking and he's been slogging with the tail and everything else, he has not been making mistakes. He's looked really, really good all the way through. And one of the things I like is his ability to come down. Obviously, he can do it to the spinners, but come down to the quicks as well. There's a lot of good interception points a long way down here. And I thought it was really noticeable. In fact, we've done a whole feature on him today. I thought it was really noticeable the way he first ball Scott Boland comes and they bowl with the wicketkeeper back, and the second ball they bring the wicketkeeper up. Like, he's in the Australians' heads a little bit with this, the way he plays Scott Boland specifically, and a lot of them is him coming down the wicket to be able to do that. So in this series so far, he's defended brilliantly. He hasn't gone out retaining the strike, and we've seen him go out attacking a few times. But averaging 42 when attacking is not particularly an issue either. And this is what I want to talk about before, about that whole number 6 thing. So if you look at the moment, he's got 7.4% of the overs. I think coming in, they would have wanted somewhere between 10 and 20%. He really hasn't bowled all that much. And when he has bowled, I know he has 3 wickets. 2 of those are with pretty poor balls, and the other one with a pitched up ball. I don't think it was terrible, but it's not a ball that you would often get a wicket with in Test cricket. He really hasn't bowled enough to justify where India are batting him. Like, they have really had a specialist number 8 and a specialist number 7, which is a remarkably weird thing. And when you look at the balls per innings, he's got 34 balls per innings. I think he has 1 innings where he's bowled over 10 overs. So you do have a situation where they're not getting a lot out of him. At the moment, if you were projecting, and it's very early in his career, if you were projecting, the chances of him being a success need to be that he's a good enough number 6 to play in the team. Certainly look like that today. And then he bowls somewhere between Paul Collingwood and Shane Watson type overs. That's the projection on him at the moment. But all-rounders develop really weirdly. And you know, you get a situation where you might get someone like Dan Vettori, who plays for a very, very long time as a number 8 and ends up as a number 6, you know, really changing his trajectory. Garfield Sobers comes in as a part-time finger spinner and finishes his career, and then almost becomes a specialist batter who bowls a little bit and then becomes an opening bowler. Like, all-rounders with natural talent like that have the ability to adapt. He's got a long time to do it. I think the most important thing for a young all-rounder is to have one skill that keeps you in the side. It would be hard to say at the moment that he doesn't have that. And you just see he's averaging 70 balls per innings and 34 balls when bowling. Also worth talking about Washington. Sundar, I think in any situation, I'm always going to bring him up. So certainly worth doing that. I didn't think he batted as well as Nitish did, but I thought he was very solid. And you know, it allowed Nitish to just bat normally, right? If that was a tail ender, he would have had to bat, you know, in a lot more of a cavalier way. And also because Washington looks so solid, he didn't have to worry about the other end at all. You'd see a little bit more limited here, right? In his scoring patterns and everything else. But again, I like the way that he took the runs too long off. We know that he likes that sort of mid-wicket area. Got stuck a couple of times, but I thought he batted really well. This is his balls faced by innings. So we've seen that this is the 4th time now that he's managed to face over 100 balls. You've got 2 players here who really look like they can be a 6 and 7 combination, especially with Jadeja getting older. It's a really interesting place for India to find themselves, because if they're at 6 and 7 and they nail those positions, it means that India has permanent 5 bowling options, and they can also then use Nitish Reddy or Washington Sundar when the conditions favor them, rather than having to just use them all the time. It's a really interesting lineup from that point. And just, again, some of the partnerships we're seeing from Washington at the moment, he seems to... I think with both of these players, there is an element of their game is very... uncorruptible. Is that a good term? Like, it's not particularly a bit like better versions of someone like Pat Cummins. There isn't a lot that can go wrong with their batting, I think, on a very good day. And so I could see why Washington would have been in so many good partnerships here. And I just wanted to talk about this. They brought it up on the broadcast, and it's something that I hadn't really noticed of recent times, even though I've done so many pieces on India's batting and the lack of runs. But you can see here that they've really been struggling to score any sorts of decent totals in the first innings for a long time. And you can see before that, they were doing okay. And if you go back through it, it's actually, like, even in these years, that's 350, that's 330, right? But even in 2020 and 2021, they were struggling with this. And you can see the difference between that and what they were doing beforehand. Some of this is the home wickets, right? I don't think we can take that away. But they haven't, if you're not making runs in the first innings consistently, you're putting a lot of pressure on your bowlers to get you out of it. Ashwin and Jadeja and Bumrah have managed to do that for them many, many times over. We saw against New Zealand, though, they weren't able to do that, right? This is what India needs to really start to rectify. I mean, the batting in general, they're making so many changes in random ways, but they just need to start making runs, right? And this innings eventually was saved, so we're back up here. I couldn't even get higher this one, but you can see that again they were within a very big chance of getting bowled out for what, 220, 250. Oh, I've already shown that one. And remember to go and follow thebestofcricket.substack.com. I got to stop there because I saw Fox Sports Courtney Walsh. I forgot that there's someone in cricket who's a cricket writer who actually works, and his name is Courtney Walsh. I think it's a him. In fact, I'm not sure now. But they've got that piece over there about Brett Lee breaking Joe Angel's arm. And of course, the Malcolm Conn has written a piece about Sam Constas, and I talked about that a little bit. In fact, there's a few pieces about Sam Constas worth going off and having a look at. And Malcolm Conn came on the podcast, and we talked about bounces and concussions. And if you haven't seen it, it's a really interesting podcast, especially the start of it, because Malcolm Conn talks about being there on the day that Phil Hughes was struck, and everything that happened there. So, very interesting story all the way through. And if you're not following bestofcricket.substack.com now, I mean, come on now. What's happening here? You have to go do that. All right, let's take a quick break. And then when we come back from the break, we will take questions from the room. Super Chat's always the best way to go, but put anything in and we'll see how we go. I'm Jared Kimber, and this is The Scoreboard. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that. Like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with. And also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today. All right, let's get some questions out. Kronk says, I swear if Rowe was captaining in this innings, he would be ridiculed for it. But Gaurav Lele is now being mentioned in comments, are praising Cummins. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, actually, that I was wondering how many questions I would get about Cummins' captaincy, because Australia looked broken, bored. I thought some of it was just Stark probably wasn't bowling as well as he could have, and Lyon was very good against Washington, but obviously struggled a little bit against at the other end. Look, the wicket wasn't doing a lot. The truth is, sometimes that is what happens here. But there was some weird stuff as well, like Mitch Marsh bowling straight after the break, after tea. Like, I've got no problem with Mitch Marsh bowling, but I would have thought that straight after tea, you would start with Boland / Stark and Lyon, whichever combination of those three. Because I think Cummins probably had bowled extra overs at that point. So, yeah, I think from that point of view, I thought that was a bit weird. But they did look a little bit out of ideas after a certain point. That can happen when you bowl to players who are not as experienced, so you don't have like 3 or 4 plans against them. Having said that, Cummins knows these players quite well. He's been teammates with at least one of them. Was he teammates with Washington? I'm trying to remember where Washington was. So he should know a little bit more about these particular players. It didn't feel like they were really cycling through the plans all that much. It felt like at a certain point, Boland just had to come back on because he was the only one bowling well. And maybe it's as simple as that. But I agree. I didn't think Cummins bowled captain particularly well. If Australia still go ahead to win this game, it won't be seen to matter that much. But it does show you how much we sort of value results and everything else. And I'm sure there'll be a question about Rishabh Pant, although we did talk about that on the Morning Glory as well. Kartik says, how much money are you putting on a 1-1 scoreline for the end of the series? Hope some of the super chat goes in for that. You're welcome. Thank you, Kartik. No, I did think about 2-1 as a potential scoreline after the Gabba, only because I thought the SCG. I thought by the SCG, the Australian bowlers might be a bit tired, and clearly Bumrah should be a bit tired by the SCG. And so you might get a situation where that has been the best batting wicket and things might change. It would be amazing if it's 1-1. I mean, what a weird way to end this year, a year where we didn't have any draws, and then suddenly we get 3 draws on the trot. Look, it's keeping it very, very interesting. I think if Nitish did nothing else today, he kept this test match alive, and potentially he's made it a straight shootout at the SCG, which is absolutely incredible, right? Genius says, is there something wrong with Indian cricket? Like, is it the captain, the coaching staff, overall batting or bowling setup, or even an issue with the red ball talent coming through, or too much of stopping the lineup? Is this the day to be asking that question? I mean, Indian cricket was dominating for ages, and then they've had one bad series. They bounced back straight away to win at Perth. They have been nagging. They had a chance of winning at the Gabba, honestly. I mean, part of that was because the rain forced Australia's thing, but they could have had a chance of winning at the Gabba. They fought their way back in here. I don't really understand the question. Teams are allowed to not win every game. And it seems we've got to a situation where the Indian team is not allowed to do that, but they are. Crunk says, good day to be Jared. It's always a good day to be Jared. Washington Sundar scored heaps, and his record right now in Test cricket is exceptional against some very tough opponents, home and away. Yeah, and look, the thing with someone like Washington, I had no issues with backing him because there aren't that many players who are that talented on both sides of the ball. And also, I've been watching cricket for a very long time, and you notice this same pattern with all-rounders again and again. I can't remember who I was writing about. Oh, Sobers. I was writing about Sobers recently, and Ian Botham is one of the few all-rounders that kind of comes out of into Test cricket fully formed. If anything, he regresses afterwards, but he's basically a top 6 bat when he starts and a frontline bowler. Keith Miller would be one before him. And to be fair, Keith Miller was a bit of a late bloomer as well in terms of cricket overall, but in Australian sense, he was one. You look at someone like Aubrey Faulkner, who was a batter, then became a bowler, everything else. That's the more common thing. What happened with Sobers, what happened with Imran, what happened with Vittori, all these sorts of players. So when you see a player like Washington, you keep that in your mind. The same that with Mitch Marsh. Like, if you go back, I wrote a piece a couple of years ago when Mitch Marsh and Ben Stokes were in a test, and I said there isn't actually that much difference between them in talent, right? Mitch Marsh probably won't ever be able to bowl like Ben Stokes just because his body won't allow him to. And he had a shocking start to Test cricket in a way that Stokes didn't. But if you actually look at their overall talent, there isn't that much different. But the reputation at that stage as well, this would have been, 2019 maybe? 2017? I don't know. There's been a lot of Ashes, whenever it was. The actual level of talent isn't that different. And so when you get a player like that, that's why Mitch Marsh at one stage had the worst batting record of any number 6 ever. Because Australia knows what it means if they have someone who is 6'5", who can come in, bowl a nagging length, nip the odd wicket away, and also absolutely destroy attacks when they get it wrong to him. And so teams will go with that. So you see someone like Washington come through and you look at it and you go, well, mechanically as a bowler, he's fine. He probably just needs to learn a little bit more about bowling. And batting, he picks up the ball well, right? Where he fit in as a batter, I still didn't know. I think he could be a fantastic number 7 now. I don't know how much higher he can bat. But all of that was there. The problem is that is no one wants to invest in players like that anymore. Everyone wants everyone to be really successful straight away. Go back to how people were talking about Jadeja a couple of years ago, right? Go back to Ishant Sharma. There was a reason India kept Ishant Sharma around. These things aren't accidents, and people don't really look at it that way. And, it's also very possible that Washington could have got pissed off that, he wasn't playing in the IPL. that his career wasn't developing the way that he wanted to, and he could have had a push for sure, right? Like we don't know what drives the players. I've never met him. I don't know. There are plenty of really talented players who I have backed who have not come on, right? But you could see the template for Washington and what he could have been, and he's still not fully developed yet. Roll says Washington Sundar would be well suited for number 3. I know it's easy to bat lower down the order, but he has a solid defensive technique and he has batted there for his state. I don't see him as a test match number 3. I know he's opened as well for his state. I don't see him as a test match opener. I just think you would make him fail. If you want someone to average like 30 to 35 and batting in the top 3, okay, maybe he could do that. I think he's a much more dangerous player at number 7 and a much more interesting player at number 7. I think you'll find better players to play number 3 because they have Rishabh Pant and they have Nitish, they have Akshar, they have, let's say Hardik doesn't come back, but they have Jadeja still at the moment. And who's the other off spinner that's in their squad as well who can bat a bit? They've got other players who can do Kotian. They've got other players who can bat and who can bowl, which gives them the flexibility to be able to play him at number 7 in a way that perhaps if he was playing in the West Indies, where Josh De Silva is probably not good enough to bat in the top 6, right? Consistently. So in the West Indies, Washington, you would have to find a way to bat him in the top 6. India doesn't have to do that. There's no reason to do that. I don't see how that benefits them. Now, if he plays really well at number 6 and number 7 for a long period of time and then moves up the order, good, take it. That's another win. Don't know why I waved my hand there. Junk Rig Sailor says, as a Kiwi, I don't know much about your first class scene, but all your experienced test pace bowlers are on the wrong side of 30. Trouble ahead with injuries and retirement. I think in general, Australia's got quite an aging side. I don't think it's just the bowlers, mate. Steve Smith is quite old as well, and Usman Khawaja. So there's quite a few older players in the lineup. It's not a young side at all. There is some really good bowlers coming through, but unfortunately, the vast majority of them have been injury prone. Joe Richardson, talking about me liking Washington Sundar before, Joe Richardson is a fantastic bowler. He really is. I would have no problem with him being one of Australia's 3 fast bowlers, and I think he would be really interesting around the world as well. Spencer Johnson is a fascinating bowler, and I'm very interested to see where he goes. Then you've got the kind of more Michael Neser type bowlers, decent seamers around, that have been doing very well of recent times in Shield cricket. If you go through Shield cricket, there's heaps of bowlers taking wickets. Part of that is the conditions, but I do think there are plenty of options. Also, you got to throw in that if Cameron Green works, you then have the option of having a 5th seamer or a 5th bowler in every lineup as well. They've also got Aaron Hardy as a potential backup, and now Bo Webster's playing very well. So they've got a couple of other versions there. They've still got Mitch Marsh as well. Maybe even someone like Will Sutherland. I'm not sure he's quite at that level, but that's another player that they have available to them. So seam bowlers and seam bowling all-rounders, they actually have a lot of. It's kind of everything else that is a bit of an issue. Like, what happens if Lyon retires? Tom Murphy's a good bowler. Is he ready to bowl all around the world? And then you've got the top order problems. Sam Constance has not fixed that problem. He's played 1 innings. He might fail in his next 10 innings, right? Usman might still retire. If they make the World Test Championship final, that might be his last test. Steve Smith might retire. Marnus is just finding his way back into form. The older bowlers should get injured more. I think there's a few different things going on there, mate, when it comes to the Australian team and how they're... Okay. Well, you'll be all happy to know that I just upgraded my Wi-Fi with a new router, which obviously is not working. And then I went and got a backup one as well, and it still dropped out. It just seems to be that this house doesn't like Wi-Fi. I'll be in my office, my new studio, in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we can fix it there. But sorry about that. Awaka says, ready a potential number 5 for India and Test. Shout out to the lovely Crick Picks episode about the best number 5 batters. Thank you very much, Waka. Go have a look at that if you haven't seen it. We also did a feature on it on the main channel. Ready a number 5? I don't think there's any rush on that. He's still young. I don't see anything within his technique that suggests he doesn't want to. I think they want 2 left-handers in their top 5. That seems to be I think Indian cricket have realized that they've struggled a little bit with that. So they've, with Rishabh and potentially Washington Sundar and Jaiswal, they've got some options there. But yeah, I don't see any reason why. I don't see anything in his game that suggests he couldn't bat at 5 or 6 based on what I have seen in this series. But I would need to see a lot more before I would say that. Like I want to see what he's like, in South Africa, and I want to see what he's like in Asia more. He doesn't have a history of making a lot of runs, so I wouldn't want to push him to 5 until he's doing that consistently in Test cricket. I think 6 is fine, because I think if you bat him at 6, that's kind of where you have your prospects quite a lot in Test cricket. And also, at 6, he's a part-time bowler, and that's fine. Whereas at 7, you really need to get more overs out of him. Varun, another super chat, says, where do you back Gill when Kohli and Rohit retire? I think he's more suited to number 4 rather than 3. I think he wants to open. I think he'll open, would be my guess. I think he'll probably stick at 3 at the moment if we're talking about in the short term. I think KL Rahul will open with Jaiswal, and Gill will bat at 3. And then they might move that around and bring Gill up to open, and maybe even KL Rahul moves to 3 at that point. That would be my guess of that. He doesn't want to bat further down the order. He's talked quite a lot about his batting position. I could be wrong. I don't, to be honest, I don't say this about many players, batting, opening, first drop or second drop, I think he kind of suits all of them. Like, there's nothing within his game that suggests to me he couldn't bat at any of those positions. So you probably have a chat with him, and then you try and work out what suits the team best from that. Did Jared still think that Nitish's runs cause India bout of the Ashton Agar syndrome? Oh, they definitely do. I mean, with 100%. In fact, if you go and watch the main video, I've talked about it there. It's causing the Ashton Agar syndrome. The difference here is that he's gone on to be successful at it. But you're talking about someone who's a specialist number 7 who basically doesn't bowl, right? That's not what India want. They couldn't drop him because of how well he was batting in this series before this innings, right? But it was causing issues to them. If you go through all the comments over the last 2.5 days on here and on social media, people are going on and on about how this lineup doesn't make sense. I kind of feel like it does. As someone who's seen England and South Africa try lineups of this style, I get it, but a lot of people don't. But he's basically flipped who he is as a player. So what happened with Ashton Agar is that didn't happen, right? So Ashton Agar never became the batter. I know he eventually with Western Australia started to make a few runs a couple of years ago, and there was like talk of him coming back as the number 7. He still wasn't a number 7. But he never did that, whereas Nitish has managed to do that. So he's gone from being a problem for India to being a problem for Australia, but he's still in the wrong position, right? Like, he was in this side to give them a full seam bowling option, and he really hasn't done that. So he's just managed to be so good in another way that it hasn't mattered. But that is exactly the Agar syndrome or conundrum. Is it syndrome or conundrum? I did do a video on it once. Anyway. Aditya says, what is your take on the specialist versus all-rounder debate? The Great West Indies or Australia team pretty much played specialists. I think if you have Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath, Jason Gillespie, Brett Lee, Damien Fleming, Colin Miller, Joel Garner, Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, Andy Roberts, Malcolm Marshall, Colin Croft, and you are guaranteed to take 20 wickets with your 4 bowlers, and they're not going to get tired because they're all great, I think it's fine, Aditya. Right? If you have 6 great batters in your side, it's fine. There have been plenty of, South Africa got to the top of the world with all-rounders. England did very well with all-rounders when they were ranked number 1 in the world as well. A slightly different kind of all-round setup. But again, having Swan and Brosnan in that side was very, very helpful to them. Having Flintoff before that was part of was a big part of what they did. England was very good. England and Australia very good in the 50s and 60s with plenty of all-rounders. West Indies' first great run was on the back of Sobers, giving them flexibility when he became, the great all-rounder. If you have a great all-rounder, you pick them. This is a different kind of situation here, Aditya, because what India have is probably more like the South African team, who was the number 2 team in the world for a long period of time. Like, you're comparing them to the 2 great sides of all time. If you have a great bowling lineup, like either of those sides do, it almost doesn't matter what your batting is at a certain point, right? If your bowling is that dominant, you're just going to win a lot of games. Those are the only 2 teams in history that have ever been that dominant with the ball. Even this India side of recent times wasn't on that level. Even the great South African sides haven't quite been on that level. You go back, the great England sides, everyone else, no one's been on that level. If you have 4 great bowlers, you would probably pick them. India do not have 4 great bowlers, right? In all conditions. They have Jasprit Bumrah, who is a great. They had Ashwin and Jadeja, which causes them some problems overseas in certain situations. And then they have Mohammad Shami, who's a fantastic bowler, but probably not an all-time great test bowler, I don't think. Maybe an Indian great, but certainly not an all-time great. They've had, Siraj and Umesh Yadav and Ishant Sharma and, Shardul Thakur was playing for them. Nitish Reddy was their 4th seamer in this series, right? They're not playing Shardul and Nitish Reddy if, I don't know, let's go back in time. Zahir Khan was available for them, or Javagal Srinath was available for them. Like, if they have that kind of a lineup, they would go with it. You go with what your strength is, right? What is their strength at the moment? It is the flexibility that these players give them. So I have absolutely no issue with that. The reason that haven't been doing better in this series is because Bumrah has been the best bowler in the series. Siraj has been fine and good at times. Akash just hasn't managed to take wickets, and the other bowlers haven't stood up. That's why they haven't. And that includes Jadeja, and that includes Ashwin, and that includes Washington, Harshit, all these different bowlers. Some of those are first choice bowlers, and they still weren't taking wickets. Do you pick the side that works best for that time? You should never think, oh, the great Australian team did this, so we have to do this. You should be looking at what you have available and making the most of that. Earl says, the pitch could change. Let's not make outrageous predictions based on how the pitch is playing now. Yes, I don't know who was making the outrageous predictions. No, I think all 3 results are possible. And Australia is still the most likely to win this game. Well, Australia winning is the most likely result ahead of a draw, because I do think the pitch will eventually change a little bit. I think we saw a couple of balls really seem quite violently. So I think there's a very big chance of that happening. But not making outrageous predictions. I mean, I've been told almost for every session so far in this test match that this next session will determine the series. And it hasn't even determined the day in some cases, let alone the test match. It just, this series is still alive, and we don't know what's going to happen next. And that's the fun of test cricket. Is that it? Us done? All right. That is it for the day. As I said, so I think a really good video on Nitish over on the main channel, which will be up in the next couple of hours or so. If this is your first time here, subscribe. What are you doing? Just subscribe. It means nothing to you. Like and comment and do all those things. Chucking us a like on the way out of all these lives really helps us with the algorithms and everything else. And of course, and we're going to play an ad for it, but please do head over to the Best of Cricket. One of my favorite sponsors that we've ever had. And it's great being able to work with someone. Also, weirdly, as you might have seen earlier, literally within our ads for the Best of Cricket was a plug for some of our stuff. It's like the inception of cricket advertising here. We will see you again for the Morning Glory tomorrow. Head over to the main channel for the other video in a little while. I'm Jared Kimber. This is The Scoreboard. As an international cricket journalist for 10 years, I tell you what, I have got a collection of international SIM cards that I will never truly understand. Now I find there is a company called Selly who gives you an eSIM, and it makes it all so much easier. So if you're planning on making any trips, download your Selly eSIM app, and you can also get a 15% discount if you say good areas, all one word, at checkout. Travel like a pro with your Selly eSIM today. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day.